We are going to be talking about how to move past, move through, deal with the 4 predictors of a breakup. We're going to define what these 4 signs are. And so that's what today is all about. I read your comments and I try to tailor content to what you're asking for. Today is the start of trying to give you more useful tools rather than just sound bites in a short video. And then how to identify the 4 predictors. I've noticed that role plays are very popular. So we're going to do some role plays to give you an idea of how you can start to really identify the 4 signs, how to pick them out quickly, and then at the end, how to work on them. And to give you some ideas of what you can work on to if some of these are challenging to move forward from. Toxic criticism. I've spoken a little bit about this in various videos. It's basically complaining in a way that applies like overarching generalities, where instead of complaining about a dirty coffee cup in the sink, you complain about that person. You're always leaving your dishes in the sink. You're always late for the appointment. You never picked up the laundry. You never do the laundry. You never take out the trash. When you use the words always and never, now you've started to pull away from the situation itself, and now you've moved it into commenting on their character. So, of course, it starts to incite, it escalates. No matter what, toxic criticism will always escalate a fight because what people are doing is they're defending their honor. They're like, what? How dare you call me selfish? And they spend the rest of the time defending why they are not selfish versus addressing the dirty coffee cup in the sink. For all of these 4 signs, I get a lot of comments in the chat. We do all 4 of these, and we've been married for 26 years and we're fine. So it does not matter if you do all 4. It does not matter if you have a big blowout fight. It doesn't matter if you have a bad day, resort to name calling, and you say things you regret, like welcome to marriage. This is what a real relationship looks like. Everybody has a bad day. Everybody resorts to at least one of these 4 things at some moment in time. That is not the issue. These are merely predictors. If these are happening at a very frequent rate, these are warning signs that, hey, look, it's not a big deal if these happen, but you want to make sure you circle back around and talk about the argument, because the biggest, reason that people break up is they feel misunderstood and there's too much resentment. So the inability to resolve past resentments it'll do one of 2 things. It'll either break you up at some point, whether it's year 3 or year 30, or it'll create just distance where you learn to just kind of live with it. You suck it up. You complain to your friends, not to your partner. You become disengaged. And then 30 years later, you're just in some sort of roommate relationship with your spouse, or you might have an affair, or you might just kind of fizzle out and say, well, maybe we should get divorced. Be aware of how these affect the long-term viability of your relationship. Be aware of them. And if they happen, make sure that you come back around when you're calm, when you're not in fight or flight, and come back and have a good, productive conversation. So that leads to defensiveness, which is something that everybody does. And so defensiveness, I think, is pretty self-explanatory for most people. I don't think I need to go into too many examples. Basically, when we get to the role play, you'll really see how this plays out in examples and scenarios. There's certainly no empathy involved. There's no validation of feelings. There's no constructive contributions to the conversation, to the conflict resolution. Defensiveness is just purely like putting each other on the offensive, like it's a counterattack. Like, oh, you think I'm this? Well, you're this, or making excuses for it and just like glossing over what the actual emotional sentiment was of the person who brought it up. If you're going to pick a worst one of the 4, contempt would be it. Contempt, the Gottmans in their research, they determined that contempt was the relationship killer, they called it. It is a very dangerous area. If this is one of your 4, this is something to really stay on top of, because contempt is something that will just deteriorate and erode a relationship over time. With all of these 4 signs, it takes a lot of introspection. It takes a lot of raw honesty. It takes a lot of humility to say, wait a minute, do they have a little bit of a leg to stand on? Is there a little bit of truth in what they're saying? Like, okay, maybe. Contempt it can come in multiple ways. One of the popular ways is eye rolling a really heavy, like melodramatic sigh, mocking your partner. So this will be name calling. It'll be like biting sarcasm, something that's not light, just like mocking. It's indicating that you feel superior to them. Would you ever roll your eye if your boss asked you to do something? Would you ever roll your eyes at them to their face? Something that has a little bit of bite behind it, a little bit of like charge behind it. Sure, what starts out lighthearted as a lighthearted sigh, lighthearted sarcasm, lighthearted mocking in the beginning, if conflicts and resentments and troubles start to build up in the relationship, as it does, then contempt is one of those areas that can just blossom in a bad way, where what started out as lighthearted 10 years later becomes a little derisive. The mocking is not so fun anymore. It's not such a joke anymore. So you just really want to notice the evolution of contempt. If you have contempt and you think it's okay, it's like, fine, great. I totally acknowledge that there are lighthearted forms of contempt, especially when you're in those first 2 to 3 years. It's like still a little bit in that honeymoon phase. Just be aware that if deeper resentments start to form, that those habits of eye rolling and sighing and mocking and sarcasm, they will start to really take root. A lot of these things are things that we saw modeled by our parents. We learned that this is just a normal way to express love, to interact with loved ones. So, okay, then the fourth one, stonewalling. There's a distinction with stonewalling and the silent treatment. So with fight or flight, it's a very physical response. Your brain, the amygdala, has signaled off there's a warning, trouble, protect yourself, danger, be fearful. And so the body starts to get ready to fight or flight or run. So the adrenaline gets pumping. When you're arguing, there can be people who just sit there and on the outside, you think that, oh, well, they're so, they're not really that bothered. They're just kind of stoic. They're not saying much. They're kind of pensive. Because if your pulse rate is at 100 beats while you're sitting down arguing with someone, then you're really at a physical level starting to get worked up into that fight or flight. Stonewalling is different from the silent treatment. There's a distinction where stonewalling is more of a fight or flight, emotional overwhelm, emotional flooding. What do I do? Versus the silent treatment, which sure can have some of that, but a lot of times the connotation for a silent treatment is, I am going to punish you. I am going to disengage. I'm out. You can just sit there with your feelings. I don't care. And so the silent treatment is more intentional. It's more controllable.